This meeting of the Ames, Iowa Property Maintenance Appeals Board is called to order. We have the roll call
Eric,
here,
Kristen,
Here.
Lauren,
Here.
Michael.
Here.
and I'd like to welcome our two new members, Michael Lauer to my left and Lauren Neal to my right. It's good to see you. We're getting back very close to the full quorum these days. Having said that, we're missing two members. Matthew and Patty were not able to be with us today, so we wish they were here. We're skipping the opening statement since we don't have a case. Is that correct? Okay. And the next is the election of chairman and vice chairperson. And since we are missing two members, it has been suggested that we table the election until we have a full quorum or a larger quorum than we do now. Discussion on that?
Need a motion.
I would like to make a motion to table that activity until the next meeting when we have all of our participants.
Second?
Question on the motion.
Yes.
When is the next meeting?
When an appeal comes up.
So, well, if it were next month,
So
It's
it's
the first
First
Thursday
Thursday.
of every month.
Right.
So that would
is that a
be
holiday?
that might be.
July 3rd.
Only for us. Oh, it is July 3rd?
July 3rd.
We can move it to the next week if we need to. for all of us.
That has
Okay.
been done before too.
So that would be the 10th. Are you guys all?
I would not be here if that were the case.
On the 3rd or the 10th?
On the 3rd.
We can move it to the 10th. Super duper.
Someone want to second the motion to table?
Well, the motion has been seconded. Discussion?
Who's second? I'm sorry.
Who seconded?
Actually, Michael and Lauren did both.
Yeah.
I didn't second. I think Lauren just
Yeah.
Oh,
seconded.
you
Yeah.
had the
Yeah,
question?
I had a
Yeah, I
question.
Okay, so Lauren seconded.
Thank you.
All in favor of tabling the election until next month, which would take us to July 10th?
Aye.
Aye. The motion has been proposed and passed. We are tabling the election until next month when Matthew and Patty can join us.
Would we be clear that we actually mean next month and not just the next meeting?
I think we should, I know what they mean, but I don't know if you need it in the minutes, that, I think they intend to say the next
Meeting.
meeting.
So it's the
with
next
a-
meeting
With a full board.
with the full board. Okay.
What is that?
And it
That's-
may
When was
be,
the last time we had a full?
Right? Yeah. We just say the next meeting, we don't have to put a date certain.
So we'll change that to the next meeting. We'll have the election.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, next is approval of the minutes from the March 6, 2025 meeting. Any motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Would you like to approve the minutes? All in favor, say aye.
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 The minutes are approved. They've already been signed and given in, as a matter of fact. Then we have these memo appeal criteria. And that's kind of a problem too, because Matthew was key in this first one, which is about the appeals and the appeals board. I'm just going to call for a discussion for the appeals criteria.
I'll just say a few words maybe to help get
Go
us
ahead.
where we need to be.
Yes.
So if you recall, we discussed the difficulties with people kind of just seeking a variance. Like maybe it's not strict compliance. I can comply, but it's really expensive, or I just really don't want to. Our code, the criteria we have for appeal aren't really set up to let you make a decision in that manner. You can't waive the code requirements. You can't just give people exemptions. So we talked about different ways to do that. And one I think that we talked about was more closely like ZBA, where they make decisions, but they have a lot of criteria. We talked through those. So I provided a memo that kind of explained that. And then I highlighted the city of Windsor Heights. This is very consistent among many of the metro jurisdictions, the criteria used. So it had all of them that I saw, so I included it. So these are just examples of what you could ask for if you wanted to have a variance process. You could make sure that all of these are true. Maybe they have to meet 3 of them, whatever you would want to decide. So this is just an option. If this is something that you're interested in, I think tonight you would make a motion to have us send this to city council on your behalf as the board recommending a change to the code. And then they would direct staff to look into it if they think that it's necessary. And then we'd probably give them another memo that explains maybe a little bit more. And if they're interested, we would have code language adopted that would create some sort of variance process. So tonight, you're just deciding if it's something that you feel strongly about that we should change, and that should go to council. If you do want to wait until Matt's here, you could probably table it till the next meeting. But I'm happy to hear discussion, or if you have questions, I can answer any questions you have about the processes.
Questions, comments?
I think that having this as an option, however, City Hall may or decide to grant it. I mean, it's just good for governance reasons, so we don't have to resort to, what was it before? Yeah, impracticable as our language.
I mean, I think the nice thing with impractical is it is really strict. So it essentially rules things out, so we don't even have to have discussion. But if that's the case, it kind of begs the question of why do we even have this committee and these processes if there's very narrow parameters that anyone can seek resolution. I will say the bullets that were included from Windsor Heights, I'm not sure if I understood like half of them, to be honest. So if we do choose to seek some sort of variance process, like I like that there would need to be very specific guidelines that an appellant would need to adhere to. But I personally would like to see those be written in a way that is clear to the appellant as well as the folks on this board, because I kind of think that's the challenge we're running into right now, is the language being used is so abstract and subjective that it's really hard to leverage that for our processes. So I think if we go that route, I would just like to see those criteria be a little bit more clear for those people going through the process.
It certainly seems to be a great deal stricter than what we're using. And I would question whether we need to be that strict.
Yeah.
We might be going a little too far there.
I agree with that. I mean, it seems like, because ultimately it comes down to a question of our judgment is like, is this a reasonable thing that we don't want you to, that we're going to allow you to do this a little differently, even though it is not exactly to code. I feel like it kind of requires us to review on a case by case basis, because I agree. It's like, why have it at all if, we're just going to deny 9 out of 10 claims, even if there might be reason to say, well, maybe we could talk about this.
I think it does give us a lot more options, especially because looking through the past minutes and the example given, there are a lot of situations that are very subjective and we can't necessarily use a one size fits all. As for the language of the bullet points, it does look pretty similar to what I've seen for zoning variances. And honestly, at least from my experience and what I've seen, is it can honestly be really difficult to meet some of these standards. And so in my opinion, I feel like we'd still have a strict level of scrutiny, but maybe with a little bit more wiggle room for unique scenarios. And that might be what we're kind of looking for.
It does seem to me like the language for Windsor Heights is maybe more ambiguous, which could be bad. It could be good. It could help. It could give you that wiggle room. But when you say stuff like a hardship, that's subjective. And those are things that ZBA currently answers. So they have to decide if it's a hardship. That's kind of what makes their choice difficult, right? It's not black and white. And so when you have these subjective or ambiguous terms, that builds in that wiggle room for you more so than impracticability. So it just kind of depends if you want that. I think it is hard to meet a lot of these criteria. I don't know if you know how many people are successful getting variances due to hardships. It's not many. Yeah, it doesn't happen a lot because it's, I mean, pretty especially for rental, I think when it's not a right to have a rental property, it'd be really hard to say this is a hardship because you don't have to utilize the property as a rental. So that could be one perspective. You could say, no, we acknowledge that you want to be a rental property, but to have to do this to get to that is a hardship, and you could approve it. So I think this allows you to go either way. It just might make your decisions more difficult.
So you might suggest more using the Windsor Heights as a guide in any rewrite that we want to do.
It's totally up to you.
Right.
Another thing is we do have currently, number 3 is that the requirements of this code are adequately satisfied by other means, and the specific proposed alternative will provide an equivalent degree of code compliance. I'm wondering if maybe that one could be wordsmithed a little bit more to say, whatever they're doing is not decreasing the level of code compliance, or life safety, like maybe if it is a driveway or something that's not putting life safety items at risk, it's something you would have more room to work with, without having to say it's impracticable.
I believe that was a factor in that decision. We had an equivalent level of compliance without having to widen the driveway.
Yeah, so typically if from before it even gets to you, if somebody can show that what they want to do meets the code, the intent of the code, and has the same level of safety protection, we would grant that through some sort of code modification or an administrative approval. So often those that can do that, from our perspective, wouldn't come to you. We don't have in the code really the ability to do that with something like a driveway, because it's not a life safety thing. It's just a driveway. Some could argue, people will probably come here and say, we don't need a driveway. None of my tenants, I'm so close to campus, they all walk. I don't need a driveway. Is that something you would consider then when becoming a rental? I don't know, but I think that the stuff from Windsor Heights gives you more ability to handle those, I think. Or I think we probably could rework that one a little bit to say if it's not a life safety item, which we're as staff working on creating a list of what life safety items are in our code. So our code says that, like, for example, letter of compliance links are issued based on the violations. If there's life safety violations, then they automatically don't get a 4-year letter of compliance. So we've kind of have an internal list of what life safety is. So we could bring that list back to you. And if it's something on that list, maybe you don't wiggle so much. If it's not a life safety thing, maybe you have a little more wiggle room. We could do something like that potentially without a variance per se.
This list of life safety items really intrigues me. That would be a big help for us.
Mhm.
And it might be some confusion as to why we're here. Basically, that's why we're here, is to protect the safety of renters. That's my opinion anyway.
I would be supportive of some sort of segmentation of appeals, and if it is this type of an appeal, or you can prove, again, it's a safety thing or not a safety thing, like it gets treated differently. I would be very supportive of that, because I do think that there are certain topics that I don't personally feel equipped to be making a subjective judgment on. And I honestly don't think the city should want us to do that either. So I think that it would make sense to create some categories where there might be more of the wiggle room we're talking about.
I could not agree more.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement with that. Having maybe not levels of scrutiny is quite the right word, but how we treat different instances about if it's about tenant safety, I think at least that would be a great stepping stone to making sure we can make good decisions that are protecting renters.
Any other ideas?
I think Sarah's given you some good research on what some other communities do. I think the thing that's most valuable, and honestly, it's a little bit harder if we have some of the people who've had a lot of experience not here, right?
Right.
Because I think your role really in providing this recommendation or letter to the council is these are ways in which you found the code unworkable, or you know what I mean? Like, this is, you don't need to fashion a solution for them, but I think that complaints that you might have or concerns that you might have about how the current code operates and how you're able to apply it really are that's the relevant information coming from this board, in my opinion.
Could we get a motion to discuss this further at a later meeting? Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, I think, in addition to having further discussion at an additional meeting, Sarah, do you feel like you've heard some things to maybe continue to advance in between now and a future meeting so that we maybe have some additional?
Yeah, I think what Vicky's saying maybe is that we can start the process with council. We can send council a memo saying there's things that aren't working. If they approve of us looking into it deeper, then we will. And part of that would be bringing back options to you guys. I would want to vet them through you before we go back to them with, here's what we're going to do. So I could write a different memo just saying, we've discovered these issues. We have concerns with our ability to make decisions and would like staff to research it further. Done. And then they'll tell us to research it. We'll come back. We can revisit this at the next meeting, and maybe I can bring back some of those different categories as another option. I can rewrite number 3 maybe to work a little bit, and we can start vetting those out. And then we would go back to council with whatever you're proposing as a text amendment based on the memo they.
Is my memory right from the last meeting that there were certain cases that tended to come up again and again and again, and the board was asked to make these decisions that maybe seemed like it would be okay, right? But at least under the code, it wasn't correct. And so if there were specific situations where you felt that, the code's just not working here and we've got tons of appeals on this basis, I think that's valuable information to provide the council.
Yeah, I think that was a discussion last time that I think Matt said it. He could kind of tell that staff was like wanting this to be approved because it makes sense, but we're just so bound by the code that we can't. I think that was where the difficulty was.
There was an observation in what we were sent online that I don't see in this one. The problem with the word impractical was that a lot of times people just didn't want to do it. They didn't want to comply. And that was the get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite true.
And some jurisdictions that I looked up had where you just go appeal to the building official and you go meet with them and state your case and they can decide to do whatever. I don't want that. I don't like that. I don't want to be the one doing that because that can just ebb and flow.
That immediately.
Yeah, it's not good. I think it's a way to let people think they've been heard, and maybe make changes. Sometimes I feel that about here, like we're trying to give people this voice, and sometimes they're coming to voice it, and we know it's not going to get approved, and those are kind of difficult.
Well,
because,
no matter what people think of the decisions, there is full transparency.
Yeah.
It's hard to be more transparent than this.
Yep.
And I think that's our strength. Or a strength.
I would say to you, just on the issue of impracticability, I think Jane may have had a discussion with this board at one point about it.
Yep.
And I mean, I tried to do some research for you before I came here. And basically there's a continuum, right? I mean, you've got impractical, which is oftentimes what you see the applicants argue, right? Like, this just isn't really convenient for me to do.
You're right.
Okay.
Inconvenient and impractical are not
Right?
the same word, not the same term.
And on the other side, you've got impossible, okay, which is quite a standard to have to meet. So
Yeah.
in between these two things comes impracticability. Everything that I can see legally, there's, in fact, Supreme Court cases have talked about the standard impracticable, and that is much closer to impossible than it is to impractical, okay?
That's right.
But it also does us the favor of telling us that it's dependent on the circumstances. So that makes it extra hard, right? I mean, there's nothing clear cut.
Right. And it's very likely the misunderstanding over the word comes from a lack of understanding of what you just laid out.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Well, and I think
The
like
same thing
Kristen
as
said,
inconvenient.
it's not easy for our appellants to know that either.
Of
They
course not.
they read impractical.
I'm sure
Or
that's right.
impracticable, that's right, which I just said.
I think I appreciate that there is a format to code language, and we have to be cognizant of the legalese. But I also think it's important for us to be thoughtful about the users of this language, and they are not lawyers. I am not a lawyer.
No.
And if we can't
No
make
one
sense of
is.
what this is, it is not doing us any favors. So I guess I would just like us to, even if structurally we end up in the same place of like, we want very limited parameters for anything to slip through this process. Honestly, I'd be fine with that still being the resolution, but I would like to see it written in a way that is clearer for everyone involved so that we all know that's our starting point. Because again, right now, I just think we're all kind of, we're working off language we don't understand.
Well, I would say fully understand.
It's
I would say
open.
we don't understand
Degrees of understanding.
it. That's
It,
right.
it seems open-ended, but not in a very useful way.
Yeah, I agree. Even if we want to adopt some of these standards or alter them, having them written in a way that's more accessible to appellants will clear up a lot of confusion about what appeals end up here in the first place, because then we'll have a better understanding of how we do our job, and then appellants will have a better understanding of impractical versus impracticable, or if we elect to use a different word.
Any other
So-
comments?
Kristen, maybe where you were going was a motion to direct staff to send council a memo stating your difficulties and then reconvene our discussion at the next meeting.
Yes. I make a motion to do that.
I second.
I'll get that in the
Thank you.
recording.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Michael, did you second?
He did.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing what we get from that. And we're on to the second memo, which is on bedrooms, which comes from a very interesting case that we had recently when there was a real conflict between actual legal rental standards and what the city assessor had been telling people. And according to the assessor, it was fully acceptable as a bedroom. And we were in full agreement here that there's just no way you can make this a bedroom and make it safe. So minimum of 70 square feet in area. I don't remember if it had that. It might not have. It did not have the minimum ceiling height of 7 feet. The minimum height was 6'8" at the tallest, and the tallest was about 6 inches wide, and then the roof sloped down on either side. So we decided that was not a bedroom, but it had already been purchased as a rental based upon the assessor's interpretation, which was not the same as ours. And that is something we would like to avoid. So looking for comments here on what we can do to get together with the city assessor, get them working with us. How can we do this?
Well, I mean, I think again, we don't have the authority to change the code. That's not what
No.
we're discussing. It sounds as though the city assessor doesn't even have standard definitions for this, and we don't have any sort of control over what they do either.
No.
I appreciated basically how this memo positions it as looking for ongoing collaboration. I think that's essentially the resolution it came to. There was some additional language. I don't know, Sarah, can you speak to the language that got added to sites? Was it your website that got additional language, or was it the city assessor site that got additional?
I asked if it would be possible to put like a disclaimer by bedrooms that this is not for rental purposes or something like that. I didn't get a great answer back. It was, she asked me what our criteria were and wanted to see if they could work with that. I never heard back from her. I don't know, Beacon is used by a lot of different jurisdictions all over the country, so I don't know how easy it is to just change something for the city of Ames. Maybe it's possible. We'd have to look into that. Yeah, I think we're trying to be more proactive as we see properties for rent or for sale. If they're for sale, I had one several weeks ago now. I think it was after we met last, but the gentleman wanted to sell the property, put another bedroom in his basement and sell the property so he could sell it as a rental with 4 bedrooms. And I said, no, don't go through the work to do that, because you can add this bedroom, you cannot add occupants. So financially, it doesn't do anything for you. He didn't understand, of course, it's kind of a weird ordinance. He didn't understand, but left the conversation knowing that was his option. He has since went ahead and added the bedroom. So I know it gets messy for us for enforcement, because if we don't know and look ahead of time, we see 4 bedrooms and 4 people in it. There's others that sell them as the bedroom, right? And we can say, hey, just so you know, that's not an approved sleeping area. I think one of the appeals we had previously for ceiling height in an attic area, we noticed was still listed with that as the bedroom area. We see that quite often, and we just kind of grit our teeth. Like, I just want to put a sign outside of the property saying, this isn't going to work for you. But we can't, and we have to be careful because we also can't affect a sale. Like, I can't just give them that information, the sale falls through, and then I'm responsible for them not selling it. So yeah, it's difficult. I think we're trying to be as proactive as we can. We're trying to make really great notes. We recommend people obtain the last deficiency letter or any information we have prior to purchasing it. We've tried to work with landlords or realtors. I got a couple that call me every single time, and others that don't even know we exist. So it's very difficult. They have a different goal than we do. And so it's trying to mesh that together and understand that we're trying to benefit your client in the long run. It's just difficult. So I don't know if there's a great answer. I think it may also be helpful to know, especially for our new people, that when the code was created in 2009, they put a bunch of criteria in there that explain board variances, retroactive conversion permits, all of these things that they were essentially grandfathering. So they said, if you're an existing rental, all this list of things can continue. We allow you to keep those because we're not going to kick you off our rental registry because you don't comply. However, new rentals now are subject to everything. So we have a much higher standard for new rentals. And it's, I think, good to understand that the intent there was that not every property should be a rental property. It has to meet these basic criteria that the council at that time thought were necessary for a rental property. And if you don't become a rental property. So new rentals are really where we kind of get like, it's close, but not close enough. But
Right.
do they have to become a rental? No, not really. It's kind of difficult, but I think it's good for you guys to understand that this is not the bedroom. Most of the appeals we have, parking, driveways, those aren't on existing rental properties. So those that are already existing are fine. This is on all new rental properties coming in that can't meet the standards that council set in 2009.
Is there a way council could, require as, a prerequisite of the sale process that information that you have be provided to a potential buyer so that they don't end up trying to, make 2 bedrooms out of, a place that can only have 1?
Yeah, I don't know what happens when properties are sold, how you have to disclose water damage. I don't know if that's something that we locally could make them have to disclose. I don't know how that would work. That'd be ideal.
Yeah, that would certainly save everybody time if possible. It just not,
Yeah.
I'm wondering how we could make potential buyers of what is intended to be rental property aware of the standards for code and inspection before they buy.
Yeah, so we offer a pre-sale inspection. That's something that we try to tell all realtors. I've met with realtors over the years, the Central Iowa Board of Realtors. I've gone to Hunziker a couple times and talked at their monthly meetings to try to explain all of these things. Many of them know, I think we try to do a good job on our website of explaining that we have a pre-sale inspection. So we will, if you're thinking about maybe selling your house, converting it to a rental, buying a house as a rental for your kids that are coming here, we'll come out and do an inspection and create a list of what it would take to become a rental.
That goes a long way right there.
Yep.
It was one of the things I had in mind. It's good to see
Yeah.
it already exists.
So now if they do that inspection and they decide, okay, it's all right, I'm going to make this a rental, we follow through with the process. Our inspector goes back 30 days later, make sure they've fulfilled everything. They get their letter of compliance. If they see that all of a sudden they have to put in a $10,000 driveway and they're not going to buy this property and do it, they remove themselves from the process and they pay a special inspection fee of $56.
The
It's very
example we're
cheap.
using, that bedroom, it fell through the cracks, it looks like.
What's that?
Oh, the bedroom. With a minimum ceiling height of 7 feet, down was
Oh.
6'8", with a sloping ceiling.
Yeah, I don't know that it fell through the cracks. It's unfortunate when people don't ask for those inspections,
Right.
because we don't have the opportunity to educate them and explain that.
Right.
Um,
Sounds like it wasn't asked for because they might
They
not
didn't know.
Nobody mentioned it to them.
Yeah.
And of course, the one to be mentioning it would be the agent for the seller,
Yeah.
but we can't compel them.
I think there's kind of two challenges. One is awareness, right? Folks don't realize that this is a potential tension for them. But two, and Matt brought this up the last time, when it's a hot market, you don't have time. So sometimes you have to act very quickly before you have all the information.
That's right.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just, so I also think there is a discussion to be said here for like, this is a business. We've talked about that before. Choosing to be a landlord is a business. There are inherent risks to being a business. And so maybe that is simply a risk that a landlord has to accept if they're not going to take the time to do their diligence
That's
on the
where we are right
process.
now. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know that, like, some of this is on these other participants who are not currently here, right? But I think the reason we asked for the memo was some frustration by the number of folks who are coming before us who have made substantial investments in a property with the intent to do something, and now they can't do it.
That is correct.
And, we don't want people to have to do that. That's not the story we want to hear.
Right.
So I agree. It sounds to me like there's limited options available to us to remedy the situation. I think you guys are already doing some great things. I am supportive of you continuing to ask questions to find further ways to enhance that process. So I think working with the city assessor is a great option. We talked about it last time. Like, it's not our job here as a board to remedy this situation, just simply to voice some concern around what we're seeing.
There is a guide on the city website that anyone purchasing a property for rental can look at. It's a room by room guide, interior, exterior, showing everything. So in the hot market, I send them that link or I refer them to the website to say, you can take this with you and do the best you can to judge.
And how you become aware of them is,
They call. That's the
how
only
they
way
call.
we know.
Right.
If they don't call, we can't help.
We got a problem. Yeah.
But a simple, kind of like what you're saying, doing your due diligence, a simple search on our website brings up a lot of information about rental properties, enough to say, whoa, I should check with somebody.
Right.
I had a question about the free inspections you were talking about. Do those typically happen before someone registers a property as a rental?
So they register the property. Once they register it, Natalie schedules them for an inspection. We'll go out and do the inspection. Once they've made all the corrections that they need to, then we issue their letter of compliance.
Okay.
So then the letter of compliance is the document that gives them 1, 2, 3, 4 years. And then let's say it's going to expire next August, we would set them up for an inspection in July, hoping that they get everything done prior to their expiration date in August, but we're very flexible with that.
But that's the standard inspection process, right? That's not the pre-inspection.
Right.
The pre-inspection would be prior to them even owning the property.
They would register it just saying, here's my contact information. I want a pre-sale inspection. We'll do the inspection. And then they can, so some people will make their offer contingent on the rental inspection.
Okay.
Some
Thank
people
you.
don't have time for contingencies, or the other offer will get picked, but
And they have to have the owner's permission for
To
us
go in and
Yeah.
do the pre.
So
A lot of-
they know.
a lot of people use it as a home inspection.
Yeah.
In lieu of a home inspection, which is a much cheaper option.
That's
We're not testing for termites or anything, but like,
That's strategic.
if you want to be a rental property, we're going to tell you everything, and it will probably match up pretty well with what a home inspector would say, except we're not getting on your roof, we're not crawling around to look for bugs or anything, so.
It sounds like there are several options available already we might just have to find a way to get them better known.
So I've done a podcast. We are looking at doing a landlord academy type thing. So we could have landlords come in, whether you're new or you just want a refresher, we can go through our top 10 violations, what's going on, when to update your contact information, kind of a 101 of being a landlord in Ames.
Nice.
We're trying to be very transparent and open and get our stuff out because it's much easier for people to understand ahead of time. And we're not trying to trick anybody or hold anyone's sale up or anything like that. We just want it to meet the code and yeah.
And avoid a possible financial loss.
Yeah, and we've talked, we had some, for example, Hunziker had some issues with our inspections and we went down and talked to them. And once they understood that we were on the same team, our goal is a successful inspection. We don't want to have to come back and we're not here to find things. Like that's not fun. We've done great since then. So I think we're trying really hard to be like, not everyone's against government, right? We're not bad government. We're trying to make your project successful. And so we're really trying to relay that.
Well, my unofficial opinion is that's one of the best things about Ames, is the way the government functions.
Mhm.
You can't say that. I have lived other places where you were not able to say that. Yeah,
So
go ahead.
I'll just say, I mean, with all that said, like, I don't really know that there's more to be done on this issue at this point in time. It sounds like the city is doing what we would expect them to do. Again, I think I would appreciate the continued follow-up with the city assessor because it does seem like I would expect that site is probably the one thing that a potential buyer is looking at. So if there's any way to create that collaboration, that seems ideal. But again, I know you're limited in what you can.
We've also talked about one option, potentially. So right now it is a violation of the code to offer for rent or rent a property without a letter of compliance. Once you register, we allow you to do it. But we could issue you a municipal citation if you're offering a property for rent that's not registered, just for offering it for rent. Having a listing, having a sign in the yard, if it's not registered with us, we could issue you a citation. One thing I think we did with Airbnbs, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, I think there's a restriction, or I think there's another rule in there that if you are misadvertising your Airbnb, it could also be subject for citation. So that might be a text amendment we think about. If you are listing it online with 4 bedrooms and we know that it only has 3 legal bedrooms, if you're misrepresenting it, perhaps that would be worthy of a citation. And then people would stop advertising them in a way that doesn't work. Or, some advertise 5 bedrooms, which makes people automatically think they can have 5 people. And that's not necessarily the case. Or we have one right now where we very clearly told them your upstairs area is not an approved sleeping area. It had a spiral staircase to it. It wasn't large enough, not tall enough. But it is advertised right now on Zillow with a spacious room upstairs. That's misleading. So
Are they calling it a spacious room, but not quite a bedroom?
yeah, it's implied that you can
Right.
sleep there.
Right.
And we catch that more often than we'd like to. So perhaps something in the code saying that false advertising or something incorrectly advertising or something against the code, then we'd at least have an ability to issue them a citation, which sometimes helps, sometimes doesn't.
If it says spacious room, but not bedroom, it does come close, although it doesn't cross it. Something I didn't say when we did this is I've seen a room like that before. My aunt and uncle had one. They made it into a playroom and game room, and it was great. Nobody ever slept there. I can remember once a couple of teenagers slept there. They slept in sleeping bags on the floor.
Yep.
And but of course they owned the house.
Right.
So it could be used, the room in question could be used for anything like that. You
Mhm.
just wouldn't want to make it a bedroom.
Correct.
I guess I would say on that issue, if you are finding that to be a challenge, I would be supportive of a recommendation to council to review those situations and potentially alter language. That being said, like I don't know that we've had any complaints come to this board with that scenario.
Right.
So I don't know what your process is, if you guys can just, as staff, can take that to the board without us having to say anything. If so, I would say like that seems like a more appropriate route, because I don't know that this board has really received enough complaints with that fact pattern to suggest it's a concern. I agree, it doesn't sound appropriate. So if that's a limitation, please address it. But
Yeah.
I think the situation we are having is people not knowing about the discrepancy between city code and sale process language, whatnot. And I feel like that's the solution we should focus on.
Yeah, I feel like based off what I've been hearing and what people have been saying, the most power that we have is just to, maybe continue working with the city assessor's office and trying to get more clear language. But I feel and think based off what's been said that that's about all we as a board have a power to do at this point.
Do you folks have any feeling on, let's assume that like we can't change the records on Beacon easily, right? And the assessor's records are the assessor's records,
Since you
right?
brought that up again, could you explain for us what Beacon is?
It's the website where, like you could look up your own property address and it shows you what your property taxes are. It's got a lot of information about the property, like square footage and number of bedrooms and things like that. And I guess my next question for you though really is it a fundamental thing about the ordinance itself that refers back to the assessor's records that you feel that there have been enough problems that perhaps the solution is, rather than trying to change the assessor's records or the assessor's site, perhaps the easier solution is to change the ordinance, like amend the ordinance so that we're not referring back to the assessor's records. If that seems to be a significant
Right.
enough problem. And I have not,
I think that's I appreciate that reframing of the situation. That being said, based on the feedback you got from the assessor, it sounds like they have very squishy standards for what counts as
Well, and I didn't
bedroom.
realize that the bedrooms weren't even counted towards the valuation.
Yeah.
I think many people think you add a bedroom and your value goes up, and apparently it doesn't.
And I think, again, I think there is you might have to remind us exactly on this ordinance, but like it is not just a bedroom thing. It's a bedroom / inhabitant head count, occupant head count, right? So that's kind of there's also that friction
Right.
going on. So I don't know which problem we're trying to solve for, but
Isn't that part of the standards that were adopted in 17 to deal with the rental problem around Canvastown, the occupancy?
Yeah, so and previously our occupancy standard was 3 unrelated people.
Mhm.
The state, regardless of the number of bedrooms you had, which was also misleading because you go to Beacon and it shows 4 bedrooms. People didn't know you could only have 3. The state said you can no longer use familial status to regulate occupancy. And so we had to find something else. And so what we came up with was 1 person per bedroom up to 5, essentially, except for a 1, 2, and 3 bedroom unit could all have a maximum of 3.
And that's the occupancy limitation that owners are running into.
So occupancy is okay. I think most people are okay with occupancy. There's another restriction, almost an overlay, if you will, in near campus neighborhoods where you cannot increase your occupancy. So you could potentially add a bedroom, but you can't use that bedroom to gain another occupant. If you did that over here on 7th Street, you could gain the occupant. So it's kind of,
That's where it gets
Hard.
complicated.
mhm,
And if you know the history of the area, it makes sense.
Yep.
If you don't, it can be confusing.
yep. We do have maps on the website to show those areas and try to be very clear, but it's not something people think about.
because I think where I was going with my original thought was I'm hesitant to suggest that like the ordinance itself needs revision because I think that there's a lot of reasons for why it's there. Like that campus, to your point, the campus surrounding neighborhood, like that was a very hard fought
Yes, it was.
discussion within our community.
Yeah, I'm not sure council has the
Over many
appetite
years.
to deal with that again.
Yeah.
So
And beyond that, like the language around what constitutes a bedroom for code, like there are safety implications for that. So like I'm
Right.
not really comfortable saying that that route needs to get changed because I think that it is more substantial than whatever the assessor is doing, which seems like not.
Which brings
a
us
lot.
back to the case we have here. The bedroom was not approved, the room was not approved as a bedroom for safety reasons,
Mhm.
but yet it was a financial loss for the new owner who bought it, intending to rent it as a bedroom.
Yep.
And that's the only case I remember, I've been on here since 21, the only case I remember coming up like that. But I think the census is, even one is too many because of the potential financial loss. The nice thing is we satisfy the safety requirement, which is more important than anything.
So it seems like we're not going to send anything to council, maybe the motion is more like accept the memo from us and request staff to continue to work on outreach and education with regards to this issue.
Any changes, additions, questions?
I am interested in asking council if there's a way they can, explore requiring, disclosure of the rental code to any potential buyer, regardless of whether they intend to use it as a rental or not, because you can't know that beforehand. Just to make sure that they get, the document in front of them that says there may be a discrepancy here and there may be a misunderstanding and we don't want you to run into that. I would want to ask council to explore the possibility of having an ordinance or a change in code that requires that, if that's possible.
So are you saying, just so I know, can put this in, that all properties sold in the city of Ames, that there be a requirement attached to the property at the time of the sale? Every single property?
I think that would have to be that way because,
Yeah, I'm just
yeah,
double.
just have that say, okay, here's the rental code. Now you've seen it.
Oh, you want the code attached?
Yes, just we're like have them have to sign off on saying, okay, we've read the rental code, because you're going to go through all those forms with the realtor and have that be like, this is transparent. We have shared this information with you. It is up to you to read it and understand whether, that you can't have X number of occupants, even though you have technically more bedrooms or whatever.
So it seems that we have,
That gets into real estate law then.
right,
Wouldn't that go back to the state for that kind of?
I think it could be a municipal ordinance that says that at the time of a sale, this is required. I think, I don't know that council will support it. I have no idea, but
That we provide a buyer with a copy of the city's rental code?
Make them aware that there is a city rental.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would give them the whole rental code, but acknowledge that there is a rental process and
Yeah.
there are different rules and
Apply to private sales too, without a realtor and things like that?
I think the idea is to plug the gaps in notification
Yeah.
that we've been talking about.
yeah, I don't know if,
Need to do some research on that one.
No,
I like the idea.
I do too.
I think that's the most transparent thing possible where, we don't end up with people having financial losses because it's bound to happen again at some point.
Gotcha.
And then it would maybe cut down on saying the problem of people listing things for more bedrooms than they're allowed. If they say when they buy it, you can't, that's not legal.
Mhm.
And we told you that, and you have signed off saying that you know that. So, and then you can get into, okay, we can issue a citation because you signed this and said you know that. It kind of makes that process a little less gray, I
Yeah.
think.
I mean, I think at the very least, hopefully it raises awareness where we know there is none. Again, will they read it or not? I don't know. But if they don't, I personally will feel less heartburn
Yeah.
about it because
Mhm.
that's on them now.
If you
clearly.
signed it and didn't read it, then that's on you.
I think it's definitely worth looking into because I mean, outside of just losses on investment, as a student, I have seen some, I'll use the word interesting rental house setups in the
Oh,
campus
that's
town
good.
area. So I think requiring that they at least have access to that or have been shown that. I mean, if it's feasible, of course, would be a great thing. So
Well, and again, they do have access now. It's just,
yeah.
do they know
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's worth.
And if it's not something we can put in the code, there's certainly a document I think that our office could prepare saying rental property and encourage rent or real estate
Yeah.
people to use, like as they're going through, just say, hey, just so you know, here's the city's rental information. If it's not something we can put in the code, maybe it's something we can create that they can utilize if they want to,
Yeah.
at least.
Because they're going to know, like, you know, they may be approached saying, I'm looking for a rental property. And they'll say, oh, you are? Well, here's this special case that you should
Yeah.
probably be aware of.
A friendly gesture that is not legally binding. would
Mhm.
be simpler.
Which I'm
Just-
sure they do, but having it formalized through the city would be, well, I guess more formal and I guess more likely to be
Yeah.
followed by everybody.
But at least, if at the very least it gives them our contact information, that's one of my main things is for people to at least know we exist and just call. So if they see the city logo, it'll maybe trigger something and they give us a call and that'd be great.
And I think Kristen, you said this, it also makes our decisions a little bit easier if we know that they were specifically given the code to read it and then we're still ending up back here depending on the situation.
So maybe we research that and bring options back for that next time too.
That sounds good.
That sounds good, yes. Anything more to deal with the bedroom and code problems?
Can we leave it as is, or do we have to make a motion about something? We're good to just move on?
Do they need a mo?
Do they need a motion to tell staff to research?
You could just just to be safe, make a motion asking staff to bring back information on requiring documentation at the time of a sale.
Yeah, if we're gonna come back on the other issue anyway.
Yeah.
That seems like it's probably the best way to handle it.
I motion to ask staff to, what did you say? Require the possibility of providing information on the rental code at time of sale.
I second.
Discussion? No discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. And I think we're down to board or staff comments. Any comments people would like to make? I'll just say for what's looked like it was going to be a short meeting, it was pretty productive.
I'll just say thank you to staff for the 2 memos. Like, I think they were very
Yeah.
well researched and written, so thank you for putting in that effort.
Certainly agreed on that. And thanks to our 2 members too, who seem to have hit the ground running, which is really nice. I don't think I said anything the first 2 or 3 meetings. So thanks and hope to see you at the next meeting and we'll have the election.
Glad to be here. Oh, do we want to, we have to formally agree when, no, you don't. Okay, you take care of that.
It happens when it happens.
We will be summoned.
Or an email.
And with that, this meeting of the Property Maintenance Appeals Board is adjourned.